Humans have always had a soft spot for the spectacular. Give us stone, bronze, a few million hours of labor, and a dash of ego, and we will build something so unnecessarily massive that future generations will squint at it and ask, "But why?" The seven wonders of the ancient world are the perfect example of this universal impulse. They weren't merely buildings. They were messages carved into the earth, saying, "Look at what we can do when we refuse to be normal." The list wasn't created at once. It evolved through centuries of travelers' notes, philosophers' musings, and enthusiastic Greek tourists who couldn't resist ranking things. These wonders became legendary, not just for their size or grandeur, but for their audacity. They were monuments that shouted across deserts, seas, and centuries. But what's truly remarkable isn't the stone and marble. It's the imagination behind them. The world before modern machinery was dangerous, unpredictable, and frequently on fire. Yet ancient engineers somehow built structures that modern architects still puzzle over. And because we humans love a good story, tales of these wonders survived long after the physical buildings crumbled. So settle in. We're heading on a journey that starts in the burning sun of the Egyptian desert, sweeps through the markets of Babylon, glides across Olympia, wanders into marble-scented Ephesus, kneels beside a royal tomb overlooking the Aegean, greets the giant bronze guardian of Rhodes, and finally climbs the monumental lighthouse standing watch over Alexandria. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the immortal wonder. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the oldest wonder on the list, and the only one still standing. If the Seven Wonders were a rock band, this one would be the lead singer, the songwriter, and probably the manager who keeps the group from falling apart. Built during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu around 2580 to 2560 BCE, the pyramid was originally a dazzling, smooth-sided triangle gleaming in the desert sun. Those outer casing stones reflected so much light that early Greek travelers insisted the structure shone like a star. Unfortunately, most of those casing stones were stripped away over the centuries because humans never met a piece of high-quality building material they didn't want to steal. How big is it really? Let's put it in perspective. Height originally 146.6 meters, or 480.6 feet. Current height 138 meters, thanks to erosion. Base length 230 meters per side. Weight around 6 million tons. Number of blocks 2.3 million, give or take the ones archaeologists keep arguing about. One stone block weighs as much as a large SUV. Some weigh as much as small elephants stacked together. The heaviest weigh more than 50 SUVs doing a group hug. And yet, somehow, thousands of workers moved all of this without cranes, wheels. Yes, the wheel existed, but Egyptians didn't use it for construction. Steel tools, or the luxury of calling one of those same-day delivery labor machines we have now. Who built it? Spoiler, not slaves. One of the biggest myths is that the pyramids were built by slaves. Modern archaeology says otherwise. Excavations near the Giza Plateau uncovered workers' villages, bakeries, breweries, medical facilities, and even workers' tombs. You don't bury slaves with honor next to the king's pyramid. The laborers were fed meat, beer, bread, and vegetables. They were basically on an ancient carb-loading diet.
Still unsurpassed. The Great Pyramid remained the tallest human-made structure for nearly 4 millennia. That's longer than most countries have existed. Even now, with all our technology, recreating it with the same precision would be wildly expensive and probably met with 1,000 zoning complaints. Mysteries and math. The pyramid is aligned so precisely with the cardinal directions that even modern architects have to double-check with GPS to achieve similar accuracy. The north-south alignment is off by only 0.067 degrees. People with expensive compasses envy that level of precision. Some measurements suggest that the Egyptians embedded mathematical constants like pi and phi into the construction, but whether they intended that or stumbled into it through clever geometry is still debated. Either way, it makes the Great Pyramid not only a wonder, but a giant stone mathematics flex. Why it became a wonder? Because nothing like it existed. And honestly, nothing quite like it ever will. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the maybe wonder. Here's where things get juicy. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon might be the world's first case of historical catfishing. Everyone talks about them, but nobody knows for sure if they even existed in Babylon, or anywhere at all. Ancient writers described green terraces bursting with flowers, vines spilling over stone ledges, engineered waterfalls, and cool, shady walkways floating above the city like an oasis in the scorching Mesopotamian sun. The problem? Babylonian tablets, the ones that describe everything from taxes to omens involving sheep, never mention them. The traditional story. The most famous legend claims that Nebuchadnezzar II built the gardens for his wife Amytis because she missed the mountains of Media. Sweet, right? A king building a massive botanical palace because his wife was homesick? Too sweet, maybe. It turns out there is zero Babylonian evidence for this romantic gesture.
the engineering behind the legend. If the gardens did exist, they would have required a system to raise water from the Euphrates, possibly an early screw pump, terraced platforms strong enough to support soil and trees, sophisticated drainage, and imported plants from far regions of the empire. Basically, it would have been the ancient world's most overachieving landscaping project. The Assyrian twist. Some modern historians believe the gardens were actually in Nineveh, built by Sennacherib, an Assyrian king who definitely did brag about constructing elaborate gardens and aqueducts. His inscriptions describe a garden like a mountain and a massive water-raising machine that sounds suspiciously like what Greek writers attributed to Babylon. Why it became a wonder? Because even the idea of such a place was intoxicatingly beautiful. The Greeks weren't used to lush landscapes. They loved cities of white stone. So when they heard about a mountain of greenery rising from a desert city, they named it a wonder instantly.
The statue of Zeus at Olympia, the god who sat down. Imagine walking into a temple and seeing a 15-meter-tall god casually sitting down, covered in gold, ivory, and enough artistic detail to make you forget how to breathe. That was the statue of Zeus. Created around 435 BCE by Phidias, the Beyoncé of ancient sculptors. It captured Zeus in a moment of serene authority. One hand held victory, the other held a scepter crowned by an eagle. His robe was hammered gold, his flesh was carved ivory. Size matters. The statue was so large that if Zeus stood up, he'd punch a hole through the roof. This wasn't just a sculpture. It was a religious experience. Strange and delightful facts. Phidias built a secret workshop behind the temple to construct the statue. Archaeologists later found his tools there. The statue's ivory dried out so easily that workers had to regularly apply oil to keep it from cracking. Basically, ancient skin care. A Roman visitor once claimed that looking at the statue made him feel like he was seeing the real Zeus. The statue's disappearance. No one knows for sure what happened to it. It may have burned in a fire in Constantinople or in Olympia. Its glory survives only in descriptions and small replica coins. Why it was a wonder? Because it blended art and divinity so perfectly that people swore they felt a literal god in the room. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, the goddess who got her own palace. If buildings could win beauty contests, the Temple of Artemis would have taken home every crown, trophy, and bouquet the ancient world had to offer. This thing wasn't just big. It wasn't just ornate. It was ridiculously, extravagantly, unapologetically stunning.
Travelers who saw it insisted that its beauty completely overshadowed every other temple in Greece. And that's saying something, because the Greeks were basically the Kardashians of temple design. A temple with multiple lives. Most buildings are lucky if they survive one construction phase. The Temple of Artemis went through at least 3. 1. The Archaic Temple. The first version dates to the 8th century BCE. Modest, wooden, and honestly nothing to write home about. 2. The Gigantic Wonder version. This is the one that made the list. Built around 550 BCE with funding from King Croesus, the man so rich that his name became a synonym for wealth. The temple had 127 Ionic columns, each 18 meters tall, dimensions larger than a football field, marble everything, sculptures by the greatest artists of the era, a roof so ornate it looked like it belonged in a divine palace. It wasn't just a religious center. It was a financial hub, marketplace, art gallery, and cultural headquarters. People didn't just come to worship. They came to gossip, trade, philosophize, hold meetings, escape the heat, and show off their clothes. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a megamall plus town hall plus cathedral plus national museum, all rolled into one, but prettier than all of them. Artemis herself. The goddess Artemis, protector of women, wilderness, childbirth, and wild animals, was worshipped differently in Ephesus than in Greece. The Ephesian Artemis wasn't the slim huntress with a bow. She was a powerful, motherly figure, adorned with symbols of fertility. Her statues show a goddess covered in intricate carvings, animals, and rows of rounded objects that scholars still argue about. Some say eggs, some say bull testicles. Academia is wild. Herostratus, the world's first clout chaser. In 356 BCE, a man named Herostratus burned the temple down purely to immortalize his name. He succeeded. Historians wrote it down, even though the Ephesians banned anyone from ever mentioning him again. So, in a twisted way, he got exactly what he wanted. Fun twist. That same night, Alexander the Great was born. Ancient writers later joked that Artemis was too busy helping Olympias deliver the baby to protect her own temple. Reconstruction. Alexander the Great offered to pay for the reconstruction. The Ephesians declined, politely but firmly, because they didn't want a mortal's name associated with the goddess's temple. They rebuilt the temple again, even larger, even more extravagant. This version lasted until a Gothic invasion in 262 CE finally demolished it. After that, bits of marble were scavenged for other buildings, including Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. Why it was a wonder? Because it was pure, unadulterated beauty, massive, harmonious, and shimmering in the sun. Ancient writers consistently ranked it above the pyramids, saying, "I have seen the walls of Babylon and the statue of Zeus, but when I saw the temple of Artemis, all else was dimmed."
The Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, a love story built in marble and sky. If you think modern couples go big with weddings, you should see what rulers did with funerals. When King Mausolus of Caria died in 353 BCE, his sister wife Artemisia II, yes, sister wife, don't ask, decided to honor him with the grandest tomb ever constructed. The result was so iconic, so enormous, so breathtaking, that the king's name became the generic word for large monumental tomb, mausoleum. Location and layout. The mausoleum stood in Halicarnassus, today Bodrum in Turkey, overlooking a turquoise bay. Its design blended three architectural cultures: Egyptian, the stepped pyramid; Greek, Ionic columns; and Lycian, the elevated tomb chamber. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a multicultural architectural party. The structure. Ancient descriptions as well as meticulous reconstructions tell us it stood approximately 45 meters tall. That's about a 15-story building. Its structure included 1. A large rectangular platform, 2. A ring of 36 marble columns, 3. Sculpted friezes and reliefs wrapping around the whole building, 4. A steep pyramidical roof, 5. A massive sculpture of Mausolus and Artemisia riding a chariot on top. The top sculpture alone may have been 6 meters tall. That's taller than most modern living rooms. Artistic Dream Team. Artemisia hired 4 of the greatest sculptors of the ancient world: Scopas, Leochares, Bryaxis, and Timotheus. This was basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe of classical sculpture. Each artist was assigned a side of the mausoleum to decorate, and legend claims the sections blended together so perfectly that you couldn't tell where one master's work ended and another's began. Artemisia's devotion. Now, this part gets dramatic. Ancient writers claim Artemisia loved Mausolus so passionately that she mixed his ashes into her wine and drank them. Historians debate whether that actually happened, but let's be honest, the ancient world was chaotic enough that it's entirely possible. Survival and destruction.
The mausoleum survived for roughly 1,600 years through earthquakes that toppled lesser buildings. Eventually, repeated quakes damaged it, and medieval crusaders dismantled parts to build a fortress. But here's the fun twist. Even the crusaders admired the sculpture so much that they saved many pieces. Some fragments still survive today in the British Museum. Why it was a wonder? Because it turned grief into artistry, politics into architecture, and love into an everlasting monument. It wasn't the biggest structure of its time, but it blended elegance and symbolism like no tomb ever had. The Colossus of Rhodes, the giant who guarded the sea. Now we arrive at the statue with the shortest lifespan, but one of the greatest reputations. The Colossus of Rhodes stood for just 54 years, but it made such an impression that people still imagine it straddling a harbor like a bronze Beyoncé in a power pose. Spoiler, it didn't. Why it was built. In 305 BCE, the ambitious and perpetually troublemaking general Demetrius Poliorcetes tried to conquer the island of Rhodes. His siege failed spectacularly, leaving behind a massive pile of abandoned war machines. The Rhodians sold all that scrap metal and decided to invest the money in a giant statue of their patron god, Helios, the sun deity. Because if your enemy gives you lemons, you melt them into bronze and make a 30-meter masterpiece. The look and construction. The Colossus stood about 33 meters, or 108 feet tall, roughly the height of the Statue of Liberty's body, not counting the pedestal. Sculptor Charles of Lindos led the project. It took 12 years to complete, and it was made of bronze plates, an iron internal framework, and stone infill to keep the legs stable. Picture ancient scaffolding hundreds of feet tall, and workers hammering red-hot bronze plates into shape under the Mediterranean sun. OSHA would have fainted on the spot. Myth versus reality. The idea that the Colossus stood with 1 foot on each side of the harbor entrance is a medieval myth. Engineers point out that such a pose would be structurally insane, especially with ancient materials. The statue most likely stood beside the harbor, on a platform, looking down over the entrance with divine confidence. The earthquake. In 226 BCE, a major earthquake snapped the statue at the knees. Rhodes was devastated, but instead of rebuilding, they consulted the Oracle of Delphi, who said the gods were clearly unhappy with the project. So the Rhodians left the enormous fallen limbs lying on the ground. Tourists came from far away just to stare at the broken fingers, each larger than a grown man. Why it was a wonder? Because humans adore big statements, and few statements were bigger than, "Hey, let's build a god the size of a building out of metal, standing in the sunniest place on earth."
The Lighthouse of Alexandria, the beacon that ruled the sea. If the ancient world had a skyscraper category in a beauty pageant, the Lighthouse of Alexandria would have walked away with the crown, sash, trophy, and probably the entire judging panel. It wasn't just tall, it was intelligent. A building with a job. A building that saved lives. A building that stood as the proud exclamation mark on the greatest port city of antiquity. The city behind the wonder. Alexandria wasn't just a city, it was the city. Founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, it became a shimmering Mediterranean magnet for scholars, merchants, mathematicians, astronomers, philosophers, sailors, and anyone who wanted intellectual stimulation or good wine. The city boasted the Great Library, yes, the one everyone mourns, the Museion, an ancient university, a massive harbor buzzing with ships from 3 continents, cosmopolitan culture blending Greek, Egyptian, Jewish, and Near Eastern traditions. And standing over it all, the lighthouse. The lighthouse's structure. Built on the small island of Pharos, which later gave the world Pharos, lighthouse, its design was both practical and poetry in stone. Ancient writers describe it in 3 tiers. 1, a square lower section, broad, imposing, built like a fortress. 2, an octagonal middle section, narrower, elegant, eye-catching. 3, a cylindrical top section, crowned with a statue, likely Poseidon or Zeus. Height estimates vary, but most scholars place it between 100 and 130 meters. For comparison, a 40-story building. Try to imagine sailors seeing that thing rising from the horizon. No wonder they wrote poems about it. The magic inside. At night, a massive furnace burned at the top, its flames reflected by a polished bronze mirror to project the light far across the sea. By day, sunlight caught the bright stone surface, guiding ships safely through treacherous coastal shallows. Some legends say the mirror could set enemy ships on fire. Unfortunately, that's physically impossible unless Zeus himself was holding the thing at just the right angle. The lighthouse's symbolism. It wasn't just a tool, it was a message. You are entering the most advanced city on earth. Welcome. It represented knowledge,
power, engineering brilliance, the triumph of human thought over nature's chaos. Earthquakes and the final fall. The lighthouse stood for over 1,500 years, a miracle in itself. But Egypt is earthquake-prone, and centuries of tremors slowly damaged the structure. By the 14th century, it was mostly ruins. In the early 2000s, underwater archaeologists located large lighthouse blocks at the bottom of Alexandria's harbor, a surreal underwater graveyard of ancient stones. Why it was a wonder? Because it was functional beauty on a breathtaking scale, a monument that watched over sailors like a stone guardian, a symbol of the world's greatest ancient city.
The legacy of the Seven Wonders. Why we can't stop talking about them. Now that we've journeyed through the desert, stood under marble giants, stared into the eyes of gods, smelled the oil of ivory statues, and watched the firelight flicker atop the world's first skyscraper, it's worth asking a simple question. Why do these wonders still matter? Because they show human ambition. Not the kind of ambition that wants more followers. Not the ambition that wants a slightly bigger house. Ancient ambition looked like this. Let's move 2 million stones to build a mountain. Let's grow a forest in the desert vertically. Let's make a statue so big it intimidates the clouds. Let's create a building so beautiful strangers cry when they see it. Let's build a tomb so perfect they'll name all tombs after it. Let's raise a bronze god next to the sea. Let's build a tower of stone that touches the sky and tells ships where home is. It wasn't modest. It wasn't sensible. It wasn't efficient. It was human, brilliant, flawed, fearless human. Because they inspire architects.
You can see echoes of the seven wonders in modern architecture. Skyscrapers with pyramidal tops. Grand civic buildings modeled after Artemis's temple. Massive sculptures influenced by Greek colossi. Memorials inspired by the mausoleum. Navigation towers inspired by the pharaohs. The wonders created a visual vocabulary of awe. Because they shaped legends. Every wonder created stories that traveled farther than the monuments themselves. The pyramid became the symbol of eternity. The gardens became a symbol of paradise. The statue of Zeus became the ultimate art inspiration.
The temple became a symbol of divine beauty. The mausoleum became a symbol of devotion. The Colossus became a symbol of triumph. The lighthouse became a symbol of knowledge guiding the world. Even after the buildings died, the stories lived on. Because they remind us that time eats everything. 6 of the wonders are gone. Gone. Not misplaced, not buried, not hidden. They're dust. That's strangely comforting. Even the biggest, brightest things humans make eventually fade, which makes the ones we build today, from bridges to books to friendships, feel more precious. Because they encourage us to dream. The ancients didn't have modern tools. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have steel, cranes, or the convenience of anything faster than a donkey. And yet, they built the impossible. It makes you wonder, what impossible thing are we capable of today?
The unofficial wonders, the ones that didn't make the list but should have. Here's the thing about the 7 wonders. The number 7 was chosen mostly because Greeks were obsessed with the number. They thought it was mystical, harmonious, symbolizing completeness. But honestly, ancient travelers could have made a list of 70 wonders. Let's take a quick detour, because this gives the full 8,000-word text even more richness, and look at marvels that didn't make the official list, but absolutely could have. 1. The Ishtar Gate of Babylon. A breathtaking blue-glazed gateway decorated with dragons and bulls. It was so stunning that modern visitors gasp just looking at the reconstructed version in Berlin. 2. The Great Library of Alexandria. Technically not a building of unusual shape, but certainly a wonder. It held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the ancient world's greatest treasure of knowledge. 3. The Acropolis of Athens. The Parthenon alone could have made the list. It lacked the sheer scale of some wonders, but architecturally, it was perfection carved in marble. 4. Stonehenge. Older than most wonders, shrouded in mystery, aligned with stars, it ticks all the wow boxes. 5. The Walls of Babylon. Massive, fortified walls that looked like something from a fantasy novel. But the Greeks stuck with 7, and honestly, their choices aged well. Each wonder represents a different flavor of human brilliance. How they were chosen, the world's first travel influencers. Who decided what counted as a wonder? There was no formal committee, no global vote, No UNESCO guidelines. The list grew from Greek poets, travelers, historians, scholars, storytellers, sailors, and merchants. People who moved around the ancient world saw something astonishing and told others. Writers like Herodotus, Callimachus, Antipater of Sidon, and Diodorus Siculus all mentioned spectacular buildings. Over time, the lists converged into the 7 we know today. So, in a way, the 7 wonders were chosen by the ancient world's equivalent of bloggers, journalists, and enthusiastic tourists gushing about must-see attractions. No wonder the list is so iconic.
When the wonders died, the tragic fates of history's greatest masterpieces. The 7 wonders dazzled millions, but time is undefeated. Each wonder had a death, and each death has a story. Some died dramatically, some quietly disintegrated. One, the Great Pyramid, refused to die at all because it's too stubborn and made of stone that laughs in erosion's face. Let's take a slow walk through the afterlife of the wonders. The Temple of Artemis burned, rebuilt, burned again. The Temple of Artemis lived through 3 lives. It was rebuilt, expanded, celebrated, and then one guy with serious attention issues torched it to make his name immortal. Later, invading Goths destroyed the second version. When Christianity spread, the temple's ruins were scavenged for building materials. Today, one lonely column stands in a swampy field like a ghost. The statue of Zeus, death by fire. Moved from Olympia to Constantinople for safekeeping, the statue survived for centuries until a fire in 475 CE consumed it. All that ivory, all that gold, all that artistic perfection, reduced to smoke in a single night.
The mausoleum, shaken apart by earthquakes. It stood proudly for centuries, even repelling looters, thanks to its height and strong construction. But nature is patient. Earthquakes between the 12th and 15th centuries broke it piece by piece. The Knights of St. John later reused parts of it to build a fortress. Some of the sculptural reliefs ended up in the British Museum. The Hanging Gardens, missing, lost, or imaginary. Their destruction remains a mystery because their existence is a mystery. If they were in Babylon, floods or warfare might have erased them. If they were in Nineveh, an earthquake or fire may have destroyed them. If they were symbolic or legendary, they died by dissolving into myth. The Colossus of Rhodes, toppled by an earthquake. The giant survived only 56 years before an earthquake snacked it at the knees. The broken bronze lay on the ground for nearly 900 years. Visitors said each finger was thicker than a human waist. Arab traders later melted the remains into scrap. Somewhere out there, someone's ancient lamp might contain atoms of the Colossus. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, crushed by nature. Earthquakes in 956, 1303, and 1323 delivered blow after blow. Eventually, the lighthouse collapsed into the sea, where archaeologists now explore its underwater corpse. The Great Pyramid, the survivor. Why did it endure? Perfect geometry, 2.3 million blocks, huge weight, minimal decoration for looters to steal, structure designed like a stone mountain. It's not just a building, it's a geological event.
What today's structures are the wonders of our era? The ancient wonders were not chosen because they were useful. They were chosen because they were astonishing. So, what would the ancients pick today? The Burj Khalifa, Dubai. A tower so tall it has to be cleaned by teams of professional Spider-Men. If the Lighthouse of Alexandria was the ancient skyscraper, the Burj is its futuristic grandchild. The Great Wall of China, built by generations of laborers across mountains, valleys, deserts. It's practically a continent-long snake of stone. The Panama Canal, a masterpiece of human willpower that sliced ocean from ocean. Ancient engineers would have fainted. The Large Hadron Collider, buried underground, smashing particles at near light speed. Aristotle would have written 10 books trying to describe it. The International Space Station, a literal flying laboratory in space where humans live months at a time. This would count as a wonder even if it did nothing except not fall out of the sky. The Sydney Opera House. If the Temple of Artemis were reborn as a modern performing arts center, it would probably look like this. The Golden Gate Bridge. A modern colossus, elegant, strong, iconic, and instantly recognizable. Humanity still builds wonders. We just use different materials now. The emotional power of the wonders, what they mean to us now. Let's take a moment to slow down. The 7 wonders are not simply stones, gardens, or statues. They are mirrors.
They reflect who we used to be and who we still are. They remind us that humans crave beauty, not convenience, not efficiency, but beauty for beauty's sake. They remind us that memory outlives stone. 6 wonders died, but people still whisper their names 2,000 years later. They remind us that imagination is our greatest resource. Before cranes, before equations, before GPS, before computers, there was raw ambition. They remind us that cultures rise, fall, and echo through time. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Persians, all gone, but their wonders speak for them. They remind us that stories keep the world alive. Even the hanging gardens, the ones we can't find, remain as one of the most vivid mental images of the ancient world. Some wonders survive in ruins, but some survive in imagination, and sometimes imagination is stronger. The 8th wonder, the human mind. If you ask historians, they'll tell you the 7 wonders were chosen because they represented excellence in architecture, engineering, art, and culture. But if you look closely, you'll see something deeper. The real wonder is the brain that dreamed them up. Before any stone was cut, before any ivory was carved, before any bronze was cast, before any terrace was irrigated, someone imagined it. The human mind is the workshop where every wonder begins. Our real superpower isn't strength, it's creativity, vision, stubbornness, the belief that impossible is a suggestion, not a rule. That's why we still read about the wonders, because they honor the greatest wonder of all, us. A world built on marvels. The 7 wonders were humanity's love letter to the universe. A message carved into stone, bronze, marble, and myth. We were here. We dreamed big. We made beautiful things. And even though 6 of them are gone, they still shine brighter than ever, preserved not by stone, but by memory, curiosity, and the stubborn desire humans have to create marvels that outlast them.